Welcome to Shop Night, where I make a gift for a deserving person in our community in 1 or 2 evenings using scrap from around my shop. Hi, I'm Michael Fine, and you probably also know me as Bohemond with bootsbybohemond.com. And tonight it's my pleasure to introduce you to Sean Mount. Sean is my new apprentice. Why don't you say hi, buddy?
Hey, how's it going?
So, Sean has come up with the idea for the new Shop Night. What's your idea?
I want to make an MOD collar, a Master of Defense collar, but in this case it's a Maester of Defense collar for Miss Maestra Nicolina de Par.
So, for Mistress Nicolina, for all you do, this Shop Night's for you. Now tell me about your idea.
I saw we had some leftover pieces from Shop Night number 1, and I was hoping that I could convince you to show me how we could create a collar out of those pieces.
All right, so our mutual friend, Master Siegfried, gave us 3 effigies to go off of. Lord Bardolf, Sir William Calthrop, and Sir Humphrey Stafford.
Alrighty.
All right, folks, here we go. We're going to show you all the pieces and get started on a collar of maintenance for a Maestra of Defense in the Society for Creative Anachronism, and we're going to put together a cool collar. Selected all the materials for our MOD collar. First, I want to point out this beautiful medallion that Sean got from my friend Truly up in Canada. Truly is a truly amazing person. She was my neighbor for a number of years at Gulf Wars, so I miss her terribly since she stopped coming. I have 10-ounce alum tanned white leather because that's traditional. The white is traditional for the collar. It's going to take the pieces really well. I have this deerskin, which is tanned white, for the backing to cover the rivets and the weights. I have my pattern, which we will talk about here in a little bit. So I do have my pattern, and I have this bar stock. And we're going to cut out 3 counterweights out of this bar stock to put behind the leather to give it weight, because the medallion's going to weigh down the collar in the front, so often they get pulled forward and hang funny. We're going to put some counterweights in the back and hide them so no one ever sees them. So I made a bunch of paper patterns that flunked, and this is the pattern that stayed, and of course this is 50% of the pattern. We would flip it. This is a hastily cut out on leather to see how it lies. Now my pattern is 1 1/2 inch wide because that's what's going to work great for these plates that I'm going to use. We're not built like Legos. We are more built like with triangles, so it'll do that when we put it on a real person. If I turn my model, you can see how it lies flat all the way around. So we know from experimentation that this shape was what we wanted, which is a kind of a U shape with horns on it. And then I will provide the pattern in the description. And what I imagine is a hole for the first ring down here. This is a quatrefoil, and then this will be 2/3 of a quatrefoil up here on the edge of the brass, and then the rest of this will be leather. To make the belt tip, I usually freehand, but I wanted to show you this tool from Tandy. And this tool at 1 1/2 inch will give you a nice shape for doing your belt tip shape or your pointed shape. Normally, folks, I freehand everything in my shop anymore. I find that using patterns and being locked into processes doesn't work for me creatively. And so I often will freehand my patterns. But because these tips are actually curving with the shape of the collar, I had to go ahead and trace them. I've gone ahead and pulled out the jig that I used for Shop Nights Episode 1, where we made the knight's belts, and I've used it to mark on the brass using my scratch awl here, but so that you could see it, I've gone back in with Sharpie. So if the holes don't look perfectly spaced, they are on the marks, but they might look different with the Sharpie. And last time I used a hand punch, where I hand punched or hand mark where all the holes went because that's more reliable. Today I'm going to show you this really cool spring-loaded punch, and it's spring-loaded to basically put a mark. And the reason why I'm marking these with a small hole is that the Whitney punch also has on each of the punch heads a dimple, and that little dimple or point that comes out catches in this spot so that it doesn't drift, and we actually punch a hole exactly where we intend to. Whitney punch, the largest bit that it came with was a 9/32, and it has the little nipple there on the punch, and what it does is it punches a hole in the metal. So I've marked my quatrefoil, and I just feel for where the mark is that I made with my punch for the location. The nipple goes right in it, and then that way it doesn't scoot around when I put it under pressure. And there we are. One trefoil. I like to use hand tools for some stuff more than I like to use power tools because I can't control the power tool as well, and the power tool can get away from me, especially when I'm doing something like shaping this from the scissor or a shear cut. We'll use a buffing wheel and a sander to clean the edges. I am just making them uniform, smooth, and round. So I'm basically shaping them on top of what the scissor had done. You also notice that I'm only taking my file one direction, because if you go like this, not on brass you won't, but on a serious metal you dull your file. So I only go the one way. Yeah, it's a thing. All right, so we have our two finished pieces where I have filed them. So let's see if they look the same. They are identical. So all that's left is, if you'll notice on this one, I filed this down. Looks like I could go a couple more cuts with this one. And this is an aggressive file because I'm going to take it to a buffing wheel in a little bit. So it's no big deal. All right, so I'm using these two as my reference holes for punching how we affix this particular piece to the collar. So I'm going to line that up with the corners perfect and perfect. And this is, you see me use the scratch awl, and I suggest using a scratch awl. This is a little bit more expensive. This is a spring-loaded punch. And all I do is press down, and it puts the punch exactly in the right spot. Line it up. And we get two quick marked perfect holes. So here are the washers that we're making from the punch outs of the brass that are left over from the previous project and the project we're doing. We're basically driving a 1/8 hole to fit our rivet. All right, Sean, so my idea is that we would use this ring to go through Truly's medallion. In order to do that, this ring will need to have a cut. And then these two will go through the ends of the straps and connect to this ring, and so they also will need to be cut.
Medallion fit on there okay? I'm gonna have to try that.
I don't know, it might fit just fine. I don't think we might have to do anything at all to it. I hate to mess with Truly stuff. And that's step one.
Very nice.
I'm now going to cut a 1-inch bar stock. I'm going to make 3 1-inch squares for counterweights on the back of the collar. So for my first cut, I'm going to get the bar out of the way. Because each plaque was made by hand, the holes are not exactly in the same place. So we're going to pair up a plaque with a cube. We're going to mark the alignment on the plaque in the cube. so that when we're putting it together, we know what they are. So I'm going to be marking them with different marks, and that way we know which one goes with which one and what its orientation is. So follow along. We're going to drill some holes. Spring-loaded punch.
Good.
Okay, just to mark our holes, because drill bits drift. They bend and flex when they're trying to push into hard metal. So I'm just going to give them a little bit better bite. Alright, so I'm going to line it up, hole it punched. It's metal, but it's mild, so I take my time. Nope. We now need to do the leather part. So this project again is done from scrap. And I have this beautiful white alum tan that I use with belts. And it's going to make a beautiful collar. The problem is this is the scrap I have for the project. And you'll notice that I can't get the whole project on the leather, or I do if I go into this pit area here. So we're going to cut out two pieces, one like this, one like that, and we're going to sew them together using a tunnel stitch. So it's important, Sean, that our joint here is going to be the same thickness of leather, otherwise it'll look weird, feel weird. I also do everything from the back side of the leather when I'm marking my patterns. So I'm going to use a black Sharpie, and when you cut, we'll be removing the entire line.
Okay.
Don't leave any line behind. And you're going to have to be very careful cutting this out, because this is all show. All these edges are show. So they're not going to be hidden, or I'm going to flip my pattern to do the other side. I want these two pieces where they're going to join to be as close together as I can, so that they're approximately the same thickness. When I look at the leather, they're going to be fine here. These are my Weiss shears. They are not as aggressive as my Tandy shears when it comes to leaving marks behind, but they do have points, so you have to be careful when you're cutting that you're not gouging the front leather with the point of the shear. You're going to have to be very controlled. Part of me says let's use a razor knife, but I think you don't have the skill for that yet.
Yeah, probably not.
Inside line is the hardest one, because the scissors going to have a tendency to want to roll, and you need to keep your scissors perpendicular to the project. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to start cutting, and then I'm going to turn the scissor, and then I'm going to rotate the scissor the other way to show you what happens when you rotate the scissor. If you take a look at this cut, you can see that there's probably a 1/4 inch difference between the outside line on the front and the outside line on the back. It's fighting me pretty hard because this leather's super thick. You know, again, it's an alum tanned bull hide, so it's 10, 11 ounce, and it's stiff as a board with the alum tanning, and it wants to force the scissor, but I'm not letting it, and I'm keeping it perpendicular. I got it. I'm just fighting to keep the scissor perpendicular to the project, and just barely remove my line. Be the best blade. So I spent some time taking a blade and shaping it for my own nefarious purposes, but you can see that it's a triangle and it's pretty damn sharp. So how to mark my hole distance. I am now going to use this divider. I love 5mm spacing, so I'm just lined it up with that for my 5mm, and now I'm going to make impressions in the leather.
Are we going to do that on both sides or just one side?
Yeah, we're going to do it on both sides. And I'm going to spin it around so I don't block the camera. But now I'm going to make sure that when I start, I am directly across from the other hole. So when they line up, we don't have our pieces skewed like that.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm going to spend a little bit of time eyeballing that. I don't think a measuring device is going to help me. easy. Now I have a jig, like I said, that mounts to the other side of my bench where I'm at. I'm actually leaning over about 2.5 feet of bench to make this easier for you to see. And I actually can go around a shoe pretty darn fast with my jig. But if I use it, the background will be so bad, no one will ever see what I'm doing. I need to put my blade back on the sharpener. Okay, so if we look at this, we're going to clean up this other, by the way, all these marks will come off. You can see that I have put it, except for the very first one, which I'll fix here in a minute, they all come out under the grain, and now our needles will just run through. We're 2 holes for our first thread. And then when we cinch that up, the next stitch is a little bit more complex. I want to run my needle through and my needle through. But before I pull it all the way through, I'm going to introduce the second needle because I don't want my strands to intermingle. So, and I can cinch my first. So I'll show you what that looks like on this side. We can see that my 2 pieces have now joined together. And I will continue to do that, passing my needles through the holes. This side, we can see that it's all nice, one nice clean joint. I want the thread going across my space here. I want all the threads on one side or the other. So I'm going to just whip underneath each stitch. This straight up isopropyl alcohol, which is so easy to get right now. Normally it's pretty easy to get. And a clean rag. Get all that dirt from the work surface. Yeah, it's gonna discolor for a little bit and then that color will go away.
Well, that's looking good, Mike. What about this stain over here? Is there something I can do to get that off it?
Well, if I eyeballed it, when I cut it out and laid out the pattern, it gets covered. Let's see how I did.
Completely gone. Awesome.
But this is what we look like. And of course, up top here in our seam in the back, this is the back hidden in the back, we will have that. So it'll be reinforced as well, but it's barely visible. And again, it's made from scrap from around the shop. That's part of Shop Night. So since we didn't have a whole piece of leather for this project, we'll use that. So the next part is assembly. So as I'm looking at this project, it occurs to me, what is her heraldic color, Sean?
Vert and or.
Is there a third color? Just the 2?
And argent?
Argent. Well, argent or that leaves vert. Wouldn't it's just an idea, bro. What do you think? Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I'm thinking what you're thinking. Thinking between the quatrefoils, it's gonna be vert.
So, okay, last minute decision, folks. Sean's decided that we're gonna put vert behind these quatrefoils. Vert, by the way, is green. So argent white or gold, vert green. So we're gonna paint some green on here, I think. Do we have green paint?
I think so.
Whenever you're attaching metal to leather, there's going to be some drift. We've lined them up as well as we could. And so when we're painting, we're going to paint past the lines, but we're going to paint past them quite a bit. But the rivets are going to be our outside dimension for making sure we don't get any paint past. So we have to be careful on the tips, but we should get this pretty good. I think we're going to have to do 2 coats.
Probably.
Even though the rivets are 1/8, it's slightly larger than the rivets because the leather closes up around them. And so where we use the long rivets on the back 3 to go through the metal plates that are the counterweights, we will now be using short rivets or shorter rivets. I believe are 1/2 inch. And then we'll be using those washers that we were using, that we made. What's that tool?
The rivet setter.
What part are you going to use? There's a dome side and there's a hole side. What side are you
I'm
using?
going to be using the hole.
You're using the hole, and that's going to advance the rivet head fully into the piece, and it's going to not bend the metal plate. Let's show that while you're working on it. So here we go, folks. I'm going to show you that. It's got a dome for rounding off. We hardly ever use that in this shop. And then it's got a hole drilled into it, and that's what we use to determine or to push the rivet and the washer all the way down onto the piece. And then here's our taped off. Make sure that only one rivet, so you've got the rest of this belt. These touching. I really like to align it so that there's only one rivet ever touching. That's the me thing. I like to have total control to make it completely flat and go the shape I want. So the flat side of the hammer to flatten the rivet, and the dome head to round it, and to keep the rivet from pulling through, we have put one of our homemade brass washers, because Shop Night is all about using scrap. And I just didn't have the washers, so we made them.
I believe I made the washers.
Well, you made them, yeah. Of course. Well, it's mostly your project. I am the director. I'm like Cecil B. DeMille of MOD colors. And that would just make you Tyrone Powers. So, if we're going to use a dated set of names. You're Vin Diesel to my McChee.
Oh, that's horrible.
That's the better analogy, right?
I don't think anything's better about that.
How come we didn't use a river set on that?
You're right, I didn't.
I was curious. I mean,
Because I was nauseous from thinking about Vin Diesel.
Okay. I think you might be striking that just a bit hard. Yeah. There's a chance you could bend the plate.
Okay.
If it's not 100% rotated up on the head, and the head of the rivet is the only thing touching. Again, each rivet head is going into a hole put into the anvil of its appropriate size. It's just deep enough, and it has the same shape as the rivet head, so that the rivet head in the flat surface is just like 1/100 of an inch above the work surface. So we shouldn't be transferring scratches to our work, and I know we're not, but to be careful, we also taped off the anvil. Another trick is to Scotch guard your top of your anvil, or to sand it, or to grind it so that you get a good smooth surface for this type of work where we're having polished brass on it. But the masking tape works just fine. We haven't transferred any scratches, and you can see that we're working quick and sloppy. There's nothing really super technical going on here. Again, flat side of the hammer for the first strike, and then the round side. The grain side. This is the suede side. I'm going to do a loosey-goosey line around our piece. Not going to touch it. I'm going to use a silver Sharpie, which wipes off of everything with alcohol. So I'm going to make this shape. And there's a couple things you can see here. First of all, when you're doing plaques like this, you can get your holes perfectly right, and you can line everything up right. But when you are hammering, drift occurs. So we have a slight twist in this piece. We have an ever so slight twist in this piece. That happens, and I don't think that it takes away from the project, because it kind of lends itself to being a handmade project and ought to look handmade. I'm going to put some tension when I'm gluing here and here. So we are going to use contact cement, and we're going to apply the glue to both sides. But first, I'm going to cut it. And so we're trying to figure out why it dries, because of course contact cement is a chemical bond. Both sides are pretty much barely tacky or sticky, and then you apply them and it's a chemical bond. It's not a wet bond. If your contact cement is wet, when you affix it, it's more like rubber cement. It isn't going to be a permanent or good fix. So we have some time to chat. I think I'm going to do it myself. I think I'm going to have one half of the horseshoe of the parts with metals be fancy side up and draped over my left forearm, while my right hand and left hand use the fingers, and I start pinching right here at this part right there, and I start affixing it here and then rolling it here while leaving the deer skin on the table and pulling it up to the project with my fingertips and working around. Okay, this is my idea, folks. It grabbed, but that's okay. It's not so bad. So I'm going to bend it here. Bring my fingers up underneath. Maybe that changed the shape quite a bit, didn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so now I'm going to put my piece upside down. Because we're working with white folks, you should probably know that we go wash our hands quite a bit. But you know, you work in the shop, things get nasty. And that is round one. Round two is this. How are we looking, Sean?
Looking good.
And you might ask, why? Well, the sides that I'm doing is not important, but this is important because we only have about 1/4 of an inch of material to really get a good bite of leather to leather contact cement. So I want to press it down and get every bit of that 1/4 inch. So really I could just be doing the tops and bottoms, or fronts and backs, or inside outside, and not worry about the sides. But you know, I would like the whole bond to be good. So I'm going to be focusing on that because it's like I said, it's 1/4 inch, not very good. Not very good, or a large amount of surface to try to get a good bond, especially where one sweats. I can't hammer like I normally would, because if I hammer, I will bend parts. And if I hammer from the top, I could start causing some scratches and have to spend a whole bunch of time with tape or something to make that knot, whatever. And you're wondering, you know, I'm cutting out my hole. How am I going to do that? Well, the simple fact is that we will be using a hole punch through the front that is smaller than the hole, so that the outside of the punch doesn't get affected by the outside diameter, or the inside diameter of that hole on this fancy piece doesn't get touched by our punch. And that'll be more than enough to pop the ring through, because after all, this is nice and soft deer tan, so it won't be a fight. All right, so we're fixed. We're going to let it dry, and then I'm going to come back with a razor knife, and I'm just going to quickly trim up the project.
I think it's looking pretty awesome. Any more surprises going to await us?
Oh, hell, I don't know. Yeah, when you're doing something new. Probably.
How'd the glue hold?
That glue looks great. Looks like our glue worked really well. I think I'm gonna need some alcohol in a few spots. We got a few finger rubs. But that iron transferred more. I think next time we should use like stainless.
Oh yeah.
But I've been washing my hands, I don't know, about every 20 minutes.
Sometimes a lot less.
Yeah, so we'll put a varnish on the outside before we send it. I will use this X-Acto blade right up until I don't like it, which was that cut right there. Dispense of that blade and get a fresh blade. It's one of the things, folks, from doing projects like this a lot is always when you need a new blade, go for it. The blade's way cheaper than the product or the project or the thing you're making and have all this time invested in. Just get a new blade whenever you start having trouble. Don't struggle with a bad blade. Give you the ring. And Shirley's medallion. Okay. This will be our last time for pre-assembly. This is the final assembly. So, lessons learned. Are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So, lessons learned. Scrap brass. When I am done cutting knives and I know the brass to be scrap, I need to treat it better. I've been throwing it in a big box bin and mistreating it, and that made this project go a little harder because we had to clean up a lot of the brass. So now we know. In future scabbard projects, I'll be all kinds of sweet to the brass after I'm done using it. So the question is, does that look like our effigy? And it sure does.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's a nice shop made for us. 12 inches. At the edges. I'm not doing Shirley's medallion. Well, that completes the collar project, and here we are with the finished piece. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope you're motivated to make something and share it with us all, and enjoy this video montage that we've put together for you.